Hello. So we're up on my local moor above the village here, and it's a pretty grey, dank day, and the forecast for the rest of the week is pretty similar weather to this. And I know that this kind of weather really can put some people off or be quite unmotivating, even disheartening to some people. But for me, getting out with a camera is just such a important thing, and there's some days where I just need to get out and take some photos, and I don't want weather to be something that influences that decision. I want I'll let the weather influence what I photograph and how I photograph, but I don't want that to be a limiting factor on whether I go out at all or not. And I thought it would be a good thing to share with you guys, just so you don't let that sort of drab forecast put you off going out and getting creative, because the more photos we take, the better, the more we grow as photographers, and the better we'll get. So it's not about the end goal, but at the same time I still believe you can take some fantastic photos in these conditions that other people won't necessarily go out in, and maybe because of that you will end up with something different and more exciting for other people to look at and enjoy. So here's some tips or ideas or things to explore if you find it hard to get motivated on days like this where it's a bit dull and a bit dank. Hopefully this will inspire you to get out and enjoy the outdoors with your camera. So the first thing that's really good in these conditions is actually getting quite close up, so looking for details. Now what happens on days like this is we lose a lot of the contrast in the light, and so we're looking for either celebrate the lack of contrast or find ways of getting contrast back into the scene. And so what that can do is it just means that getting those big sweeping vistas is less likely to result in a really good shot, and so focusing on the smaller, the macro, the close-up stuff can be actually really rewarding with that softer light. So wet moss and lichens are a really good go-to if you're looking for something, and you'll find those in any environment really, whether you're in the countryside or whether you're in the city. You should be able to find some moss and lichen around, and if it's got a wet surface to it, even better, because that can really make it stand out, and it actually looks better in that soft light than it does in the really strong light. There's a kestrel hunting up there. We'll talk about silhouettes and silhouetted birds and things like that in a bit. But yeah, so getting closer up can be really good. And that idea of depth and losing that sense of depth in a softer, flatter light is an interesting one in itself, because we can bring that back in a different way using depth of field, depth of field is this idea of clarity throughout an image. And so as we get closer to subjects, we tend to get a shallower depth of field. So that means that there's a small part of the photo in focus and the rest is soft or falls out of focus. And that could be a really interesting way of bringing depth back into a photo. So if we photographed a bit of moss with a background that was far away, and we got closer to it, that soft background would make that moss jump out and jump forward. And that would happen with any subject that you got close to, and any subject that you increased the distance between your subject and the background. So that can be a really good way. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense to you and you can use that. The next thing we can do is look at movement, because when we have lower light conditions, what tends to happen is the shutter speed of the camera will slow down to allow more light in. And what that means is we can start to get more movement blur in the shot. And so ideally you want to have control of your camera, so you can have a camera that you can change the shutter speed. It's worth investigating if you don't know how to do that, or feel free to skip to the next point of inspiration if that's not interest to you. But being able to use a slower shutter speed means a lot of creative options are opened up to you. You can look at water and how water might move through a waterfall, a fast running beck, anything like that, even drips of water on a canal. You could also use slower shutter speed on things that are going past you quite fast, whether it's a cyclist, a car, vintage car on a country lane, or a courier in a city. Using those slower shutter speeds and those panning techniques where you try and move the camera at the same speed as your subject can be really, really interesting, really different, and really good thing to experiment and play with when this light is lower and allows you to get those slower shutter speeds. The third thing you can do on days like this is actually use the use of silhouettes. And so we said how earlier the low light level days mean that the shutter speed gets slower. That makes it very hard to photograph things that are movement. But if you're using the sky as the background, suddenly those shutter speeds will speed up and they will be less of a concern for you. So if you've got a flock of birds flying overhead, starlings, maybe redwings, maybe a red kite, if you use that as a silhouette, your shutter speed should be fast enough to freeze the movement anyway on its own, and they can be really quite striking photos using silhouettes. And you don't just get some red grouse just flying past, silhouetted. There we go. Oh, and a red kite over there as well. Brilliant. So silhouettes can be quite good. Don't have to be wildlife, don't have to be birds. They can be walkers on the brow of a hill, going across, fell runners maybe, skyscrapers towering overhead with maybe some pigeons flying over. There's lots of options with silhouettes that can make really striking, powerful, simplistic photographs. So really good to play around with on the duller days as well. So have a little think about that. That's a great little option to play and experiment with. And of course, silhouettes tend to have this black and white feel about them, this monochrome feel about them, and that can be a really good thing to explore and play with as well. I find on these softer, flatter light days, quite often colour can be quite tricky, especially in a wider scene, because you get these real sort of blues, this cyan colour that's from the overcast clouds, so it does tend to create this cyan colour cast, and it can be a bit tricky to make work well. And actually the simplicity of using black and white can turn a scene that is unusable in a colour to a really interesting and usable scene in black and white and monochrome. And monochrome's taking a bit of a comeback. There's quite a few cameras, Leica and Ricoh, bringing out black and white only digital cameras. I'm not a big fan of doing that because it limits your options, but I definitely enjoy converting colour scenes back into black and white when I'm looking at them on the computer. They can be quite good. So that's definitely something to explore and experiment with. You can even do that on the phone, but in the filters afterwards. Again, phone filters, I prefer adding them after I've taken the shot, so I've got full choice available to me rather than applying the filters while shooting. So that's definitely something worth exploring. And that leads us to our fifth and final tip. Hopefully I've got my counting right. I'm walking around trying to avoid, it's the other interesting thing is if you're someone who likes going out and not running into people, these are the perfect days to do it, because I haven't encountered anyone yet. But if it was sunny, I'd have to stop or find somewhere really remote to avoid running into people if that's what I wanted to do. So another good reason to head out on days like this. But the last point really that we want to look at is tests. So if you're really struggling for inspiration, but you still want to sort of get out and experiment or play with the camera, running tests can be a really good one to do, because you want to, the more you know your camera, the better shots you're going to be able to achieve. And there's quite often on my camera workshops, I'm encouraging people to run lots of tests. So one of them is so you know how the ISO and noise performance performs on your camera. So you could actually do work your way through the ISOs in an environment, and then to go back on your computer and see which point you're happy with in that. The other thing you can do is another test. If you've got a camera with a lens or several lenses, you can use your lenses and practice going through the depth of field, or the F numbers, the aperture range really, because that's quite a complicated thing, which I don't want to get into too much. But with aperture, there is a sweet spot where the depth of field, that clarity we were talking about for a scene, and the image quality hits a peak, and it's not where a lot of people tend to think. So a lot of people tend to think this f22 is peak depth of field, and it tends to be f11, but it doesn't necessarily, that's not a strict rule. So it's worth you going through your lens range and just going through those apertures, finding where that sweet spot is, if indeed you want to try and get a point where you have a good depth of field and the maximum quality photo. So there's lots of other little tests you can do. Just use it as a chance to just play around with the camera, practice going onto a camera mode that you're not normally used to. It's important to make mistakes in every scenario, but it's better to make mistakes on a day where you're not taking once in a lifetime shots than on a day where you can just pop out and just have a little play around. So, maybe you move into manual and experiment with manual. Maybe you take the tripod out and practice using your tripod. It's a great opportunity to just be a bit freer and feel free to sort of fail in a way. And so that's 5 reasons. Let me check my list to check I haven't messed that up with my counting. I wrote a little less before I came out. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yes. So those are the 5 points of what you can do on dull days, dank days, when the weather's not ideal or classic shooting conditions. And hopefully you find that inspiring. If you do, you share the photos in the walking photography community, which is gonna get a bit of a refresh soon. At the moment it's just on Facebook, but we're gonna get a refresh. But you can comment in the videos and stuff and send me messages or emails, which I do include people's photos in the email newsletters as well. So let me know what you get up to in these low light days and the experiments you do, because I'd love to see them. And I hope you found that useful. So more videos coming soon, more newsletters coming soon as well. We're nearly at the end of January, so it's greater times ahead, I think. So see you soon.